Welcome to Everyday Linux User. In today's video we're going to be looking at Ubuntu over the last 10 years to see has it actually got better? How do we define whether a system's got better? Well, we can look at the applications. Have they improved? Has the user experience improved? Has performance improved? Things like that. So this is the latest version of Ubuntu 23.10. And I'm going to show you the setup of how I've put my analysis together. So I've downloaded the latest Ubuntu version 23.10 and all the LTSs back to 14.04. That's the last supported release of Ubuntu. Now up to here, up to 18.04, they're only getting security updates. 20.04 will keep going until 2025. 22.04's got a good 5 years left on it, 4 years left on it, and this one, because it's a point release, will only last until the middle of next year when we'll get another LTS release. But I thought it was important to bring that one in to show you that whether there's been an improvement since 22.04. Now, the first thing to note, the first thing I noted was the download sizes. So Ubuntu 14.04, as you can see, comes in at 1.1 gigabyte, goes up half a gigabyte for 16.04, another 0.7 gigs for 18.04, and then it almost doubles from that point onwards, and then up to 4.7 for 22.04 and 4.8 for 23.10. So only a 0.1 gig rise since 22.04 and the one from October this year. So you'd think if you're getting 3.78 gigabytes more stuff in Ubuntu 23.10, that should make some sort of improvement on 14.04. So let's look at the virtual machine setup that I've got for each of these. So all of them have been set up the same way. So if I go into the settings of the virtual machines, you'll see all of them have got 8 gigabyte of RAM, all of them have got 4 CPUs, and the display is right up at the top. So I've given it all I can in terms of performance on this machine as a virtual machine, and you'll see that even for 23.10 I'm not cheating the system or anything like that. So again, 8 gig of RAM, all processors, and the display all the way up to the end, and that's the same for all of them. So I'm not going to show you all of them, but hopefully you'll believe me when I say that's what I've done for all of them. So the first thing I looked at was boot time, and there's two timings I set for boot time. One was the amount of time it takes to get to the boot screen where you log in, so the login screen. So if I take 14.04 for example, you can see it took that amount of time, and in my analysis it averaged about 11 to 12 seconds to get to this boot screen. And then the second timing I took was I entered my password, and as soon as I pressed return I took another timing how long it took to get from here to the desktop. What I wanted to see was, did the Ubuntu developers cache lots of stuff that after you logged in suddenly you get to the other screen really quickly. So that's why I've done two timings. So this one takes about 5 seconds. As you can see. So the next benchmark I looked at was the installed size, because obviously 14.04's got 1 gigabyte download, 23.10's got 4.8 gigabyte download. So how much of that is actually installed onto your system? So if I look at the disk usage analyzer, you'll see for 1404 4.8 gigabytes has been used. And it's worth saying it was 4.3, but I've installed a couple of things. I've installed Chromium now, so the initial installed size was 4.03. The next right, the system monitor, and you see under resources about 730 megabytes of RAM. The lowest it went down to in my testing was 678. So that's about the amount of RAM usage that you were getting. You do get various spikes in processes, but the main users are Compiz and GNOME System Monitor. So that's that. Other things I looked at were just general performance overall, how well the system ran. So like if I load LibreOffice, I didn't time this. I was just looking for how user friendly it is. So it's fairly snappy. What I didn't like is Compiz graphics particularly. You can see that's taken a bit of time to come to the screen. This is using the Unity desktop still for 1404. So what that means is if the menus for applications are still on the top bar like this, and you've got your cross up here rather than as part of the application itself. Other things I looked at were versions of software, so I'm not going to open them all up for your own sanity, but in 1404 the version of Firefox was 65. By the time we get to 23 it's version 118. LibreOffice, the version is 4.2.82 for 1404. By the time you get up to 2310 it's 7.6.2.1. Rhythmbox doesn't move all that much, and that isn't particularly surprising, as one, audio players, once they've got the functionality, you don't really need to do too much to them, and two, the introduction of things like Spotify and Amazon Music and things like that, and certain devices around the house, means that audio players probably don't need that much extra functionality. Offline music use is probably less than it used to be, so it's gone up from 3.0.2 for version 1404 to 3.4.7 in 2310. And since version 18 it's been at the 3.4 level, so it's gone from 3.4.2 to 3.4.7. Thunderbird started off at 60.6.1 in 1404, is now 115.3.1. Worth noting that it hasn't changed since 2204. Video players have changed. It used to be Totem, now it's the GNOME audio player, and that comes with the fact that the desktop changes at version 18 from Unity to GNOME. So this is Ubuntu 1404. Issues I had, the hardware all works fine here, printers, Bluetooth and Wi-Fi. The only thing I would say is the printer couldn't get the exact driver for it in 1404, but that is fixed from 1604 onwards. The package management is also key. In 1404 it's plain Debian packages, as it is in 1604. By the time you get 1804 it's Debian and Snap packages, although it's quite experimental. 2004 it was Snap. I did notice that there were icon issues with snaps in 2004. In 2204 snaps, 2310, they're like the main package format. So the other thing I looked at was, obviously because there's different package formats, I looked at how quick they would load. So if I open Chromium, it takes about 3 or 4 seconds in Unity 1404. So if we move up to 1604, the boot time's fairly similar to 1404, actually improved slightly on 1604 to 1404 on my benchmarks. It went from about 12 seconds down to 11 and a half seconds. But the trade-off for that is that it seems to take longer post login. Instead of the 5 or 6 seconds to log in, it was taking 11 seconds to get to the next point. So I think there was preloading of stuff in one and then post-loading of stuff in the other. So this is 1604. So 1604, if we look at the disk usage analyzer, it's now using 5.4 gigabytes. So in my benchmark, it was 4.9, but I installed Chromium, so that's taken it up to 5.4. So if you think that it's gone up half a gig in disk usage, it's actually gone up half a gig in disk usage in terms of installed size as well. In terms of resource usage, the memory usage has gone up to 1.1 gigabytes, and so that's up from about 700 megs up to 1.1 gigabytes. You don't actually get that much more bang for your buck in 1604 to 1404. More memory usage, more disk usage, and it doesn't perform particularly any better. The printer driver is now correct though for 1604. It's worth noting that for 1404 and 1604 we've got this Amazon thing, that disappears later on. And we've still got the old Ubuntu App Store, and this is horrific. Another thing to note is Unity, when you go to the applications, is the way this looks and feels as well. Whilst you've got the search facility, everything's bundled in this great big pile of mulch. You can use the search feature, but yeah, the Unity Dash not as good as the GNOME one, although you do have these separate folders for playing videos, music, photos, etc. So if I had music installed on here, it would appear here, and the same with photos and videos. And you can see that this is still causing me problems. So if I search for I don't know, WPS maybe, I don't know if that was around then, you can see Ubuntu Software Manager is not playing particularly well. Now it might not be fair in the sense that we're now 7 years on, maybe it's just the way it is, but this is quite a fresh install and I'm not getting any return back in any quick amount of time. Chromium, in my benchmarks it took about 4 seconds to load, and I'd imagine that's not much off of that, so that's quite good. Version numbers 79 for Firefox, 5.1.6 for LibreOffice, 3.3 for Rhythmbox, and 68.10 for Thunderbird. So small releases, nothing too dramatic. Is it better than 1404? It's better in terms of hardware support, but negligible in terms of applications. So here we are on 18.4. Now I found this was horrific. It's the worst one of all of them. The boot time is now about 22 seconds, and that's just to the login screen. So you can see I'm there now. If I log in, and this took another 16 seconds. If we look at the disk usage, 1804, and you can see it's now using, so you've got, it's changed the way this looks. So it's just under 10 gigabytes. I had it as 8 gigabytes before I installed any software, so you can see what it is now. When it comes to performance, oddly for the video, it's actually performing better than it was when I was doing my benchmarks. But you can see how long it's taken to load this one application. It's just a system monitor. You want it to load quite snappily. We're using 8 gigs of RAM here, so you'd expect better. 1.5 gigabyte of RAM there. In my benchmarks it was using 1.2, so it's slightly higher. Maybe there's some updates going on, and it's gradually dropping down. So if we look at the actual processors, and so GNOME's using most of the CPU and GNOME's using most of the memory, and this is the theme going onwards from 1804 onwards actually. In terms of applications, I have installed Chromium, and it installed as a snap, and so I believe it's a snap that I'm loading here. You can see it's now saying to install it, even though I installed it already. So I had nothing but problems with 1804. You can see this is coming from the snap. So this is me opening Chromium for the first time, and this is going to take some time because it's a snap, but not too long, just a little bit longer than the you can see it's all a little bit stuttery, but you can get to the YouTube for everyday Linux user. So 1804 is just about usable. It's possibly the worst of all the Ubuntus I've tried out. Here we go on to 2004 now. So 2004 took about 25 seconds to log in. And that's 25 seconds just to get to the username prompt. So you can see that's more than double that of 1404. What's all the extra stuff coming in? I think it's probably systemd related and GNOME related. And then beyond there, after I log in, it's still going to take another 11 seconds to log in. So icons of the desktop now. Disk space, let's go full screen. Disk space, well, there's 14.6 gigabytes available from 25, so it's about 11 gigabytes used. In my benchmarks, I had it down as 10 gigabytes used, which is about right. And then we've got the performance monitor. The system's a lot snappier than it was for 1804. The other thing you'll notice since 1804 is the Amazon thing's gone from here. So the memory usage 1.2 gigabytes. So that's actually gone up a little bit from 1804, but the actual performance of the system is actually a lot better. Again, the biggest users are GNOME, and the Snap Store is quite high as well at 159 meg. So you're using 172 meg there for something that manages the installation of your applications. But you can see up here I've just had an update thing appear, so maybe that's what that is. Version numbers for version 20, so Firefox 111, LibreOffice 6.4.7.2, Rhythmbox 3.4.4, and Thunderbird 102.8. So LibreOffice has gone up from 6.0 to 6.4 between 18 and 20. Firefox went up from 92 to 111. Rhythmbox went up from 3.4.2 to 3.4.4, and Thunderbird seems to have gone downwards. Not sure if that's true or whether the original benchmark was wrong. Installing applications, I noticed with 2004 it is a snap. It's slow to install, but the actual App Store compared with version 1804 is chalk and cheese. So if I look for say Steam, it does come back with something a lot quicker than it did for 1804. Obviously it's a little bit slower to install if you're using snaps, but this one's not using snaps, it's using the Debian package, but this one will be the snap. And you can see it's 197 meg in size. For Chromium, it loads quite quickly. Actually, it was the slowest to load across all 6 systems on 2004. It was about 5.5 seconds for that, but actually performs better. As an application, it actually performs better than it did for 1804. So 2004 wasn't a bad one. So if you want it, it's better than it was for 1804. I'm hoping you're seeing the same thing. Now, many of you will be on the next one because it's the latest LTS. So this is 2204. For me, this takes quite a while to boot up. About at least 30 seconds or more. So if we were doing a straight base test between 1404 and 2204 from a pure login perspective, it's over 3 times longer to log in just to the boot screen, to the login screen for 2204 than 1404. And post login, it's double, so it's gone from 5 seconds to 11 seconds. So overall, from 16 to 48. So that's quite a big jump in time between the two. So you'd expect 2204 to be something pretty special to warrant such a change in performance. Now remember, at this point, so from 2004 onwards, it's gone from a download size of between 1 and 2 gig up to the 4 gigabytes. So for 2204 it's a 4.7 gig download. And you can see I've got 10.7 gig available, so we're using 15 gigabytes now. In my benchmark it was 13, so I've obviously installed something else. So if we look at the system monitor, I mean, you can see it's performing okay as a system, and it's using 1.4 gigabytes of RAM here, but it's not terrible in terms of performance. Again, the GNOME shell and Snap Store are the things using the most memory. In terms of applications, Firefox is now on 116 from 111. LibreOffice is now 7.3.7.2 from 6.4.7.2. Riddlebox is exactly the same version at 3.4.4, and Thunderbird is 115.3.1. So that's gone up 13 versions since 2004. In terms of the App Store, I did have a problem with the App Store for 2204. When installing an app, it wasn't showing me the progress bar. So let's see if we can repeat that. So we're going to use the Steam installer. I'm assuming it's a Snap package. That's the Debian. So we'll click the install here. When I was installing the Chromium one, that went to installing and it just said install, and that's it. It wouldn't actually show anything else. So I tried again and it said, well, it's already installing, so I had no knowledge when it was finished. But you can see that's okay. So if we try in Chromium, in my benchmarks it was about 5 seconds. So it's not loading quicker than the Debian package from 1404, but one of the criticisms of Snap is that they don't perform as well as the normal Debian packages. Whilst that may be true, it's negligible. So for 1404, Chromium was loading 3.55 seconds, and for 2204 it's 4.83, so it's about a second. Now I don't know on a lower spec machine, like I know when I've used a 4GB of RAM machine it's felt unresponsive at times, so I'd recommend perhaps using Ubuntu on a higher spec machine. But you can see that seems fairly responsive. Can't do anything about the download time, that's just the internet. So that's 2204, and now I'm going to show you the light at the end of the tunnel on this, and this might be useful for those of you thinking of upgrading from 2204 to 2310. Now if you're a long-term support user, you are generally better off staying on the long-term support release, but if you do want to try the latest 2310, I've got another video coming up about 2310, but the boot time is slightly quicker than 2204, and certainly the post login time has gone back down to 8 seconds from 11 seconds, and so that's as quick as it's been since 1604. The actual logging time up to the username bit is around about the 30-second mark, so it's still longer than 2004. So here we are back where we started in 2310. So if we look at the disk usage, remember this is the largest download of them all at 4.8 gigabytes, and the amount of disk space used, so you've got 15.5 available, so it's using around about 8.5 there. So you've now got the biggest download size with the least disk usage. I'm not sure why is the download gone from 1.1 gigabyte to 4.8 gigabytes? What is that all for hardware support? Is that where we are with things? Is that why the disk size usage is high? Installed size, as you can see, is that. So the memory usage, it's worth pointing out that this is definitely a lot better in terms of performance than anything since 1804. So the memory usage back down to 1.2 from 1.4 for 2204, so using less memory, but generally the performance is feeling a lot slicker, and the reason for that is the App Store doesn't seem to be using up any space. So it used to be that GNOME shell, and then you had the Snap Store was taking up a lot of the space. It's not doing that anymore. Whether that's spread across multiple programs, I don't know, but it's definitely different there. Obviously package management snaps. The icons look nice. You have this new App Store for 2310, so you can see that looks nice. So if we look for Steam now, and you can see that comes back really quick. So the new App Store is very nice, but it's definitely more geared towards Snap packages. So And instead of a progress bar, you get a little dial that goes round, a bit like you do in your browsers. Package versions, Firefox is 118.0.1. That's up from 1.16. LibreOffice has gone up to 7.6.2.1 from 7.3. Rhythmbox has gone up to 3.4.7, and so that's gone up by 0.03. And then Thunderbird has stayed on 115.3.1. Packages aren't that quick to install. I think, like with most systems, once you've got packages installed, you generally get all your packages installed and then you use the system. It's not like you're spending all your time installing packages. So it took a while to install, but you can see it's there now. But it comes to Chromium, which was installed as a snap. Oh, helps if I spell it right. Now I noticed this loaded a lot quicker than previously. There you go. That's in terms of load time is as quick as it has been since 1604. It's actually quicker than 1604. So that's a snap package loading a lot quicker than it was before. The screen is a lot better as well. So what is my conclusion? Ubuntu 23.10 is an improvement on 22.04. That's it is. Snap packages are now loading quicker than they ever have been. Is Ubuntu 23.10 better than Ubuntu 14.04? Has Ubuntu improved over the last 10 years? The answer is actually yes, it has. Now, GNOME is a lot more resource intensive than Unity was, but the look and feel of GNOME, it has to be said, is, especially the way Ubuntu have done it, it is nicer than the old Unity. Losing the menus, like for instance the file manager, you having your menus and these little bars here is a lot nicer than having you used to have this little menu bar across the top for 14.04. The icons are nicer, the styling's nicer, so yeah, from a aesthetic point of view it's nicer. Performance generally okay. The app stores definitely a million times better than the old Ubuntu App Center. It was the one part of Ubuntu that I thought needed change for a long time, and they've actually changed it, and it's good. No complaints there. They've actually changed the installer. I haven't showed you that here. Is that the installer's changed for Ubuntu? Now, ironically, it's the one part of Ubuntu that I didn't think actually needed that much work done on it. It actually worked quite nicely as it did before. Out of all the installers across all Linux distributions, I thought it was one of the better ones. So the upshot is, yes, it is better. It is an improving system, and the thing is, it's looking more modern as it goes along. So it's definitely not worse than it was before, and 23.10 is looking nice. And 23.10 is also using the latest version of GNOME. So if you want all the features of GNOME, the latest versions, then 23.10 is pretty good, as Larry David would say. And that's the end of the video. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you next time on Everyday Linux User.